Hi, I've been busy working on my multiplayer game and I've ran into a lot of issues with the multiplayer spawner. And I thought I took the time to make a video about these issues because you're most likely going to have them as well. I think they're very basic issues and I don't think they're very well explained on the website. Most of these issues were solved by people in the Godot Discord. So if you ever get stuck, make sure to join the Discord, ask some questions. There are a lot of helpful people there. And let's get started. So the setup I followed is the one from Godot itself. There's a very handy site, an article actually, about multiplayer in Godot 4 scene replication. This will showcase how you can just set up an easy host join thing, synchronizing properties. But the most important part is the selecting levels, and that's where I had a lot of issues. So this is what I'm using in my game right now. The function change level with a multiplayer spawner. So how does that work? You have a multiplayer spawner, which is just some type of node in Godot, which has a spawn path. This is your node. It just can be anything. This is just where your replicated scenes are going to be placed under. And then you also have to tell it what scenes need to be replicated. Meaning that if any of these scenes get added to this node, so when I call a change level, for example, it will clear all the children under that level node and add the scene that I give with. This will automatically sync to all the clients because the multiplayer spawner is looking at that node. So you just need to call this on the server and all the clients will see it too. This is pretty basic. That's all the things you can, how to do it and how the code works is also explained in the article. But where it gets tricky is when you have multiple menus. For example, for me, I had a lobby menu, which is just a simple scene with some AI where you can ready up and the host will see all the maps and he can choose a map. But of course, when a player connects, it first needs to go to the lobby scene and then to the game scene. And I used to just change the scene to the lobby, call an RPC to the client to do the same, then start up the game. All that is fine, but you also need to clear. That's fine. That's really fine. The issue comes in when you do the same for a map. So, for example, here I have my 3D game. It has a monster, it has the players, and these monsters have synchronizers, the player has synchronizers. Then it's gonna give issues. And that's where the multiplayer spawner comes in. Things like change scene to pack and change scene to file are gonna give a lot of problems when you RPC or change in mid game. Because the server will say to the client, hey, change, the client change, but the server is still calling RPCs to the client. It gets messy. That issue you don't have with a multiplayer spawner. So that's reason one to use it. But then also you need to remember that you need to start using the multiplayer spawner from the start of your game, because I used to change the scene to the lobby and then use the multiplayer spawner to load in the level and then just change the scene back to the lobby. Again, this is going to give issues, and to showcase why, let's say you have a multiplayer, you have the server and you have a client. The server starts a game, it spawns in a tree or something. It's a very bad tree, but it's a tree. You get the gist. The client joins, and the server will automatically sync that tree to the client. But if you have a client that first spawns in the lobby scene, it just changes to it. So let's say, for the sake of an example, it spawns in a fire for its own. So it has a fire. It then joins the server. The server says, okay, we sing this, it's gonna just spawn in a tree. So you still have the fire on the client. When you then change scenes, the server will say, okay, we need to clean up the level thing, and we need to spawn in something else, like a bush. It's gonna tell the clients to do the same, but the clients will only clean up this part because the server has no clue that the fire exists. So that is why it's very important that from the start of development, it's best that you just every scene that you know, like this is gonna change that scene with that scene, just use the multiplayer spawner. So if you have a lobby scene, it's gonna be replaced by the game scene. It's very important that you sync up the lobby scene as well with the multiplayer spawner, because otherwise you're gonna have issues. Something else that's very important is that the multiplayer spawner will also help with spawning in stuff during runtime. You could do this with RPCs, but again, I'm gonna show this. I have a player with the ability to spawn something in. So this is just a 3D thing. It would spawn in this. I could call an RPC, spawn in, place it on the server, do all that stuff. That's not the biggest issue. The issue lies in the following part. When I have the server, I tell him spawn in this person. And the server automatically names it 1. I have the client, they sync with an RPC, but I just tell the client to also instantiate the scene, and this might get the name 2. It will work because they both have an object, but they aren't linked. Meaning that if I destroy this on the server, it's going to give an error on the client because it can't find the node. What you can also have is that you spawn in 2 of these guys, and now this one gets ID 2 on the server, and the client also spawns it in, but this gets ID 3. I destroy this guy, and this guy gets removed. You don't want that. So what you then can do is you can still do it with an RPC, but why not use the multiplayer spawner? It's made for it. So I have this player which has a project handler which will listen to certain inputs to then just spawn in a tripwire. This will be an RPC because I want the server to spawn in the tripwire. So the server is gonna listen, and then it's gonna use a multiplayer spawner. This is a node in the chaser map. It's here, jump scare spawner, and I just attached it to the script here. And what it's gonna do, it's gonna call the spawn function. What this is gonna do, instead of just adding a child to the multiplayer spawner, you can use a spawn function, and this will be using a customized function. I'll show that in a bit. And in this spawn function, I just pass a dictionary of items. And what this looks like on the multiplayer spawner. So I have the scene added again, like this is the one you need to sync. This is where you need to look when there's something placed under that you need to sync to the clients. And then in the code itself, I take the spawner and I set the spawn function. This will make it that it will use the customized function, call it spawn tripwire, and here down in my code I have the function spawn tripwire. So when I call spawn, it's actually calling spawn tripwire, and data is just dictionary, so you can just access the keys. I instantiate the scene, and this is the important part. I give it a name so that the name is synced across clients. And I just call it trip. And in my utilities, I have a simple function that's just going to increment a number so that all the trips have a unique ID with the number. And then I just, very important, you need to return that instantiated scene. And that would work. And one thing that's also very important, I'll show you that it works while I explain, is that another reason to use a multiplayer spawner is because of positions. The client's gonna show a bit later. So if I sprint towards my other player here, I can then we can see each other, and this one can spawn in, and it's synced across client and server. And you can see that the position is also synced. That's the one part that the multiplayer spawner isn't good at, is syncing positions. Meaning that for the maps, you can just use the default spawn function. That's not going to give an issue because you just need to spawn in the map at 000. That will work. But you need to use a customized function if you have issues with the position not being synced. Because here you can set the position using the data, so the dictionary that I give to my function. And here I pass in the position, because if you just use the default function, the position will always be 000. And there was a bug that I don't know if they're going to fix it, but it does not really seem to be doing what it should be doing. But with a customized function, you can easily just bypass that by setting the position. So to quickly recap, use a multiplayer spawner from the beginning so that you don't have the multiplayer spawner already being out of sync before being in the multiplayer instance. Use IDs so that you can properly sync them. You don't really need to use a multiplayer spawner for this, but I don't really see why you wouldn't. It's very easy, and you won't have issues with the synced and the despawns. It becomes very easy altogether when you just use a spawner. You can, of course, use RPCs, but to really make sure that you RPC an ID so that the server and client still have the correct name. Because an RPC for a queue-free or for a spawn is going to look at node path. So if the names are the same, they should be linked. And lastly, remember that the multiplayer spawner has issues with syncing positions. I think these three are my main issues I've had with my multiplayer spawner and my multiplayer game in general. I might make another tutorial talking about RPCs and how to properly use them, but that's not for now. Let me know in the comments if you're interested for that. And I think that's it. Bye bye.